You study the principles of quantum physics, practice expansion techniques, and try everything to raise your vibration, yet your bank account and emotional struggles remain exactly the same. It feels like you are crashing against an invisible wall. And the question the universe is forcing you to face today is this: why does physical reality seem to punish the very people who are trying the hardest to change their lives? The answer is uncomfortable, but freeing. The struggle is not coming from reality itself, but from a hidden conflict inside you. One part of you is trying to move forward, while another is reacting with fear, doubt, and urgency. And the illusion doesn't respond to your effort. It reflects that inner contradiction. Pause for a moment. Notice your body right now. Is there tension? Restlessness? That signal matters more than all the techniques you've learned. Because if your state is pressure, reality can only mirror pressure back. And until you see this clearly, you'll keep trying harder, without realizing what is actually holding everything in place. The greatest danger that 99% of people fall into right now is trying to force the external world to transform through physical and mental exhaustion. There is a silent mistake in the way you react to your problems that is completely blocking your magnetic field. And until you shut this down, nothing will move forward. I'm going to show you the exact solution to reverse this, but first, you need to understand how your perception is being deceived. You've been taught that effort equals results, that if you push harder, think more, plan better, and stay disciplined long enough, reality will eventually give in. And at a surface level, that seems true. It works for simple tasks. But when it comes to deeper change, your emotional patterns, your financial reality, your sense of peace, this same strategy quietly turns against you. Because what feels like determination is often tension in disguise. Every time you try to force a solution while feeling fear, urgency, or lack, your body is sending a very clear signal, not of creation but of resistance. And here's the part most people miss. The illusion doesn't respond to what you want. It reflects what you are broadcasting in that moment. So while your mind is focused on fixing your life, your nervous system is locked into a state of pressure. That pressure becomes your signal, and the external world, instead of changing, stabilizes around it. This is why you can spend hours thinking about how to solve a problem, replaying conversations, trying to control outcomes, and still feel like nothing is shifting. It's not because you're doing too little. It's because the energy behind your actions is reinforcing the very pattern you're trying to escape. There's a subtle addiction hidden here. The addiction to effort, to the feeling that if you just do a little more, push a little harder, things will finally break open. But that constant pushing keeps you entangled with the illusion at its most rigid level, the level where everything feels fixed, heavy, and slow to change. Look closely at your last stressful moment. Maybe it was about money, a relationship, or uncertainty about your future. Notice how quickly your body reacted. Tight chest, fast thoughts, the need to act immediately. That reaction feels necessary, even responsible. But in reality, it's the exact moment where your power begins to leak away, because instead of observing the situation, you merge with it. And once you merge with the problem, you start playing by its rules. This is how the illusion keeps repeating itself, not by trapping you externally, but by pulling you into unconscious reactions internally. The more you react, the more real and solid everything appears. The more solid it feels, the harder you try to break through it. And the cycle continues. You might even notice this in small things. Sending a message and checking your phone every minute, looking at your bank account and immediately calculating worst-case scenarios, trying to stay positive while underneath there's a current of anxiety you're trying to outrun. All of this is force, subtle but constant, and force creates friction. That friction doesn't just slow things down, it distorts your perception. It makes it seem like reality is working against you, when in truth it's simply mirroring the tension you're holding. What makes this trap so powerful is that it feels productive. It feels like you're doing something. But internally it's the same loop repeating in different forms. You're trying to change the reflection without realizing you're still feeding the same source. And here's where it becomes even more deceptive. The more effort you apply without awareness, the more delayed results you create. Because the illusion, by its nature, doesn't update instantly. There's a lag, a gap between what you project and what you see, so you end up trapped in a strange contradiction. You're working hard to change your present, but what you're seeing is still shaped by your past reactions. That mismatch creates frustration, and frustration pushes you to try even harder. Without realizing it, you're reinforcing yesterday's signal while expecting tomorrow's result. This is why it feels like hitting an invisible wall, not because nothing is happening, but because what is happening hasn't caught up to you yet. Do you know that horrible feeling of doing everything right internally, only to look around and still see the crisis standing untouched in front of you? It hurts because you believe your present moment is solid. In reality, matter is dense and operates with a time delay. The chaos you are experiencing today is only the fossil, the delayed light of your emissions from the past. Think about that for a second, not as an abstract idea, but as something you can actually observe. What you are seeing right now, your bank balance, your relationships, the way people respond to you, is not a live broadcast. It's a recording, a projection that took time to form, time to organize, and time to appear in this physical layer you call reality. The illusion feels immediate, but it isn't. And this misunderstanding is where most of the pain comes from. You start making internal changes. You calm your thoughts. You try to respond differently. Maybe you even feel moments of clarity or peace. But then you open your eyes and everything still looks the same. The same problems, the same numbers, the same patterns. So a quiet doubt begins to grow. Is this even working? That doubt is not random. It's triggered by the delay, because your nervous system is wired to trust what it sees more than what it knows. When the external world doesn't instantly confirm your internal shift, your body interprets it as failure. And that's where people abandon the process too early, not realizing they are standing in the middle of a transition that hasn't fully surfaced yet. Imagine planting a seed and digging it up every day to check if it's growing. You wouldn't call that patience, but this is exactly what happens when you keep checking the illusion for immediate proof. You interrupt the process. Matter moves slowly because it is the densest expression of your energy. It has inertia. It carries momentum from what was already set in motion. So even if you change your internal state today, what you see around you is still catching up from yesterday, last week, sometimes even longer. This is what makes the illusion so convincing. It presents outdated information as if it were current truth. And if you don't understand this, you will react to old data as if it's happening now. That reaction matters more than you think. Because when you look at a situation that is actually a residue of the past and respond with fear, frustration, or urgency, you are not just reacting, you are renewing it. You are sending a fresh signal that matches the same frequency that created that situation in the first place. So instead of allowing the old pattern to dissolve, you feed it again. This is why things seem stuck. Not because change isn't happening, but because the response to the delay keeps reinforcing the previous cycle. You can even see this in simple moments. You decide to shift your mindset around money. For a brief moment, you feel calm, maybe even hopeful. Then you check your account and nothing has changed. Instantly, your chest tightens. Thoughts rush in. This isn't working. And just like that, the new signal collapses back into the old one. The illusion didn't stop you. The delay exposed your impatience, and that impatience is deeply human. It comes from a part of you that wants safety, certainty, immediate feedback. But when that part takes control, it pulls you back into reactive patterns. It drags your awareness out of the present and locks it into survival mode. Because if what you see feels like a threat, your body will treat it as one. And this is where the situation becomes more intense than it first appears. What started as a simple misunderstanding of timing begins to activate something much deeper inside you. Your system doesn't just question the process anymore, it prepares to defend itself. The moment you interpret the delay as danger, your entire body shifts state. And once that happens, you are no longer observing the illusion. You are inside it, reacting to it, and reinforcing it without even realizing. And this is where the situation starts becoming critical. When you panic over this reflection of the past, your body interprets it as an attack. Your brain enters a primitive survival mode, floods your body with cortisol, and instantly blocks your ability to access the field of infinite possibilities. At that moment, It doesn't matter how much you've studied, how many techniques you know, or how clear your intentions were just minutes before. Your system is no longer oriented toward creation. It is oriented toward protection, and protection is narrow. When your body believes something is wrong, it reduces your perception to what feels urgent and threatening. Your attention shrinks. Your thinking becomes repetitive. You start scanning for problems, looking for what could go wrong, trying to regain control as fast as possible. It feels like clarity, but it's actually contraction. This is the prison most people don't realize they are living in, because from the inside it feels justified. If your bank account looks unstable, if a relationship feels uncertain, if something important seems at risk, of course you react. Of course your body tightens. Of course your mind starts racing. It all seems logical. But here's the part that changes everything. The illusion you are reacting to is not happening in real time. It's a delayed projection. Yet your body doesn't know that. It treats the image as if it's immediate danger. So you end up fighting a shadow as if it were a real threat. And the more seriously you take that shadow, the deeper you fall into the reaction. Once cortisol rises, your access to higher reasoning and calm observation drops. You lose connection with the part of you that can step back and see the bigger picture. Instead, you become fully identified with the situation. You're no longer aware that you're observing the illusion. You feel trapped inside it. This is why it becomes so hard to shift anything in that state. Not because change is impossible, but because your body is not allowing new signals to stabilize. Every time a small sense of calm or trust begins to emerge, it gets interrupted by another wave of urgency, another thought, another physical reaction pulling you back into survival mode. It becomes a loop. You react to what you see. Your reaction reinforces the same signal, and the illusion continues to reflect it back. Over time, this loop feels like reality itself, solid, unchangeable, personal. But it's not personal. It's patterned. And the pattern is driven by one thing: your nervous system trying to keep you safe using outdated information. There's a subtle but powerful shift that begins when you notice this in real time. Not later, not after the fact, but in the exact moment your body starts to tighten, when your breath shortens, when your thoughts speed up. That is the doorway. Because if you miss that moment, the reaction takes over completely. Most people only realize what happened after they've already spiraled, after they've checked their phone 10 times, replayed scenarios in their mind, or made decisions from a place of pressure. By then, the state is already established. But if you can catch the first signal, even briefly, something different becomes possible. You begin to see that the intensity you feel is not coming from the situation itself, but from your interpretation of it. The illusion is just presenting an image. The charge comes from the meaning your body assigns to it, and that meaning is often automatic. It's shaped by memory, by past experiences, by conditioning that tells you what is dangerous and what is safe. So when something resembles a past threat, your system reacts instantly, without questioning whether it's actually relevant now. That's why the reaction feels so real, so convincing. But it's also why it can be changed, not by fighting it, not by suppressing it, but by seeing it clearly enough that it loses its grip. Because the moment you become aware that your body is in survival mode, you are no longer fully inside it. There's a small gap, a space where observation returns, and in that space, something unexpected happens. You realize that trying to overpower this state with forced control or artificial calm doesn't work either. In fact, it often makes the tension worse. It creates a second layer of resistance on top of the first, which leads many people into the next trap without even noticing it. They stop trusting their natural response, but instead of understanding it, they try to cover it up. They try to replace fear with something that looks better on the surface, without actually changing what's happening underneath. This is the moment when the problem reaches its peak. In desperation, you try to mask your fear by repeating positive affirmations in front of the mirror. But the universe does not listen to your words. It reads your magnetism. Forcing positivity while your chest is crushed by anxiety creates an electrical friction that destroys your manifestation and injects even more energy into your scarcity. On the surface, it looks like you're doing the right thing. You've learned that thoughts shape reality, so you try to correct your thoughts as quickly as possible. You replace "I'm worried" with "everything is working out." You repeat phrases that sound strong, controlled, confident, but underneath those words, your body is still tense. Your breath is shallow, your stomach is tight, and that mismatch matters more than the words themselves. Because the illusion doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to the coherence between what you think, what you feel, and what your body is signaling. When those are aligned, there's clarity. When they're not, there's noise. Forced positivity is noise. It creates an internal split. One part of you is trying to project calm and certainty, while another part is still holding fear and urgency. That internal conflict doesn't cancel out the fear, it amplifies it. It's like pressing the gas pedal and the brake at the same time. You burn energy, but you don't move. And after a while, something even more subtle happens. You stop trusting your own signals. You begin to feel that your natural reactions are wrong, that fear is something to hide or eliminate instantly. So instead of listening to what your body is trying to show you, you override it. You cover it with phrases, distractions, or rigid control. But what is suppressed doesn't disappear. It goes underground. And from there it continues to shape your state, quietly influencing your decisions, your tone of voice, the way you show up in conversations, the way you interpret the illusion around you. Even if your words sound positive, the underlying signal remains unchanged. This is why people often feel exhausted after trying to stay positive all day. It's not natural alignment, it's maintenance. Constant effort to keep a surface image intact while something else is happening underneath. And the illusion reflects that tension back in subtle ways, delays, mixed results. Situations that almost improve, then fall back. It creates confusion because you believe you're doing everything right, yet the feedback doesn't match. So you try harder. You repeat the affirmations with more intensity, you push away negative thoughts faster, you try to control your inner world more tightly, but the more force you apply, the more resistance you create. Because you're still operating from the same foundation, fear of what might happen if you don't control everything. There's a quiet honesty required here that most people avoid, not because they don't want to grow, but because it feels uncomfortable at first. It means admitting that beneath the positive words there is still doubt, still tension, still a sense of lack. And that's not a failure, that's information. When you stop trying to cover it up, you can finally see it clearly. You can notice where your body contracts, where your thoughts speed up, where your attention narrows. Instead of labeling it as wrong, you begin to observe it as part of your current state. That observation changes the dynamic, because now you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not creating that internal friction between what is and what you think should be. The energy that was being used to maintain a false state becomes available again, and something interesting begins to happen in that space. Without forcing anything, your system starts to settle. Not because you told it to, but because you stopped pushing against it. The intensity softens. The urgency loses some of its grip. There's a small shift, almost unnoticeable at first, but real. It's not positivity, it's something quieter, more neutral. And that neutrality is often misunderstood. It doesn't feel like excitement or certainty. It feels like a pause, like stepping out of the storm just enough to see it from a different angle. The illusion is still there, the circumstances haven't changed yet, but your relationship to them begins to shift. And that shift is where the real change starts, not from forcing a better feeling, but from no longer feeding the old one. If brute force and fake positivity only make everything worse, how do we escape this suffocating cycle? Feel the relief this brings. The secret is neutrality. When you look at your current problem, take a deep breath and simply stop reacting with panic. You cut off the energy that was feeding that hologram. The moment you remove fear from the equation, the wall loses its strength and begins to collapse on its own. Neutrality is often misunderstood because it doesn't feel dramatic. There's no surge of motivation, no instant clarity, no emotional high. It's quiet, almost plain. And because of that, many people overlook it, thinking nothing is happening. But this is exactly where the shift begins. When you stop reacting, even for a few seconds, something subtle changes in your body. Your breath deepens slightly, Your muscles loosen just a bit. Your thoughts slow down enough for you to notice them instead of being pulled by them. That small gap is what most people never allow themselves to experience. Try something simple right now. Bring to mind a situation that has been bothering you, not the most overwhelming one, just something real. As you think about it, notice what happens in your body. Where does the tension show up first? Is it your chest, your stomach, your jaw? Don't try to change it, just observe. Now, instead of solving the problem, take one slow breath in and let it out without forcing anything. And for a brief moment, drop the need to fix, control, or predict. You're not ignoring the situation, you're just pausing your reaction to it. That pause is more powerful than it looks, because in that moment, you are no longer feeding the illusion with the same signal. The external image may still be there, unchanged, but your internal response has shifted. And that shift interrupts the pattern that was keeping everything locked in place. Stay there for a few seconds longer than feels comfortable. Your mind might try to jump back in, offering solutions, warnings, or reminders of what could go wrong. That's normal. It's part of the old pattern trying to reassert itself. You don't need to fight it. Just notice it and return to that simple state of observation. This is not about suppressing your thoughts or pretending everything is fine. It's about allowing your system to reset, even briefly, so it's no longer operating from panic. When panic drops, your perception changes. You begin to see that the situation in front of you, the one that felt so urgent and overwhelming, is not as solid as it seemed. The illusion loses some of its weight. Not because the circumstances have changed yet, but because you are no longer amplifying them internally. And that creates space. In that space, your responses become different. You're less reactive, less impulsive. You don't feel the same pressure to act immediately. And from the outside, it might look like you're doing less. But internally, you're doing something far more effective. You're no longer reinforcing the old signal. This is where trust begins to replace control. Not blind trust, not passive waiting, but a grounded sense that you don't need to fight the illusion to change it. You only need to stop feeding it with the same emotional charge. At first, this might feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Your system is used to constant engagement, constant effort, constant monitoring of what's wrong. Letting go of that, even for a moment, can feel like you're losing control. But look closely. Were you really in control when you were reacting from panic? Or were you being driven by it? Neutrality brings you back to a place where your actions are no longer dictated by fear, and from there something more stable can emerge, not forced positivity, not denial, but a quiet clarity that doesn't need to prove anything. You may start to notice small changes, not necessarily in the external world right away, but in how you move through it. Conversations feel less charged, decisions feel less pressured. Your attention is no longer locked onto what's missing or wrong. And that shift begins to influence what you attract and how you respond to it. Because the illusion is sensitive to consistency, it reorganizes not around brief moments of calm, but around sustained changes in your state. Each time you return to neutrality instead of panic, you weaken the old pattern a little more. Over time, those small interruptions add up, and what once felt like a solid wall starts to show cracks, not because you pushed harder, but because you stopped holding it together from the inside. This is the paradox most people miss. Change doesn't begin when you do more. It begins when you stop reinforcing what was already there. And as this becomes clearer, something else begins to shift in your understanding. The illusion you've been trying to escape might not be the enemy you thought it was. And here is the truth that shatters everything. Common sense has taught you until now. We grew up hearing that we must escape the matrix, that the illusion is a cruel prison designed to make us suffer. A lie. The illusion never wanted to destroy you. It is only a perfect mathematical mirror, a neutral simulator showing you exactly where your internal frequency is still corrupted. That idea can feel uncomfortable at first because it removes the villain. If the illusion is not against you, then there's nothing to fight, no external force to blame. And for many people, that's unsettling, because blaming the outside world is what keeps the sense of control alive. But look at what happens when you stop treating reality as an enemy. The tension drops. You no longer feel like you're in a constant battle, trying to break through something that is resisting you. Instead, you begin to see patterns, repetitions, signals. The illusion becomes less like a wall and more like feedback. Clear, precise, and sometimes brutally honest feedback. If a situation keeps showing up in your life, financial stress, emotional conflict, uncertainty, it's not random, and it's not punishment. It's a reflection that hasn't been understood yet, not intellectually, but at the level of your reactions, your assumptions, your default state. The illusion doesn't speak in words, it speaks in outcomes. And those outcomes are shaped by the consistency of your internal state over time. Not by what you say once, not by what you wish for occasionally, but by what you repeatedly embody without noticing. This is why two people can use the same techniques, read the same books, repeat the same affirmations, and still get completely different results, because the illusion is not responding to the method, it's responding to the underlying coherence behind it. If there is tension, it reflects tension. If there is doubt, it reflects doubt. If there is quiet stability, even before external proof appears, it begins to reorganize around that. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. When you see the illusion this way, something shifts in how you relate to your problems. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" you begin to ask, "What is this showing me about my current state?" That question alone changes your position. You move from resistance to observation. And observation has a very different quality. It's not passive, but it's not aggressive either. It's attentive, curious. It allows space for things to reveal themselves instead of forcing them to change. You might notice, for example, that every time you think about money, there's a subtle contraction in your body, a tightening that happens before any conscious thought, or that in relationships, you anticipate rejection before anything actually goes wrong. These are not surface-level patterns. They are signals embedded in your system. The illusion reflects them because they are consistent, not because you want them, but because they are active. And once you see that, the focus naturally shifts inward, not in a way that blames you, but in a way that gives you back influence. Because if the reflection is accurate, then changing the source changes what is reflected. But this is where many people make another quiet mistake. They understand the idea of the mirror, but they still try to manipulate it from the outside. They adjust their behavior, their words, their actions, hoping the reflection will follow. And sometimes it does, briefly. But if the internal signal hasn't changed, the old pattern returns. Because the illusion doesn't hold memory the way you think. It updates constantly based on what is most stable in you. So the real work is not in controlling appearances. It's in stabilizing a different internal state long enough that it becomes your new baseline. That takes honesty, not the kind that criticizes or judges, but the kind that sees clearly without distortion, the kind that admits this is what I'm actually feeling, instead of covering it up or trying to replace it too quickly. Because only what is seen can be changed. And the illusion is precise in what it shows you. It doesn't exaggerate and it doesn't hide. It reflects exactly what is being held, even in subtle ways. The delay might make it seem disconnected, but the pattern is always there if you look closely. This is where the relationship with reality becomes different. You stop trying to escape it, and you start reading it. You stop asking why things are happening to you, and you start seeing how they are responding to you. And in that shift, something important begins to surface. A realization that the real mistake was never the illusion itself, but how you've been trying to interact with it all along. Remember that silent mistake of blocking your magnetic field that I mentioned at the beginning? This is exactly it, using all your vital energy trying to clean a stain directly from the glass of the mirror. As long as you try to fix the external illusion by force, instead of changing the internal projector, the universe will continue reflecting nothing but your own exhaustion back to you. It's subtle because it doesn't look like a mistake. It looks responsible. It looks like effort, discipline, persistence. You see something in your life that isn't working, and your instinct is to act on it, adjust it, correct it as quickly as possible. That's what you've been trained to do. But the illusion doesn't operate the way you were taught to interact with it. When you focus all your attention on the reflection, trying to reshape it directly, you are constantly reacting to something that has already been formed. You're always one step behind, chasing outcomes that are the result of past signals. And no matter how fast you move, that gap remains. This is why it feels like you're working so hard but staying in the same place. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, trying to fix your reflection by touching the glass. You wipe, press, adjust, but nothing changes in the image itself, not because the mirror is broken, but because you're applying effort in the wrong direction. The real adjustment is behind you, not in front of you, and yet most of your energy goes outward. You try to control conversations, predict outcomes, avoid discomfort, secure results. Even when you turn inward, it's often with the same intention, to quickly change how you feel, so the outside will respond. That urgency is the clue, because it reveals that your focus is still on the reflection. You're still trying to make the illusion behave differently instead of understanding why it looks the way it does. The true mistake is not action itself. Action can be useful, even necessary. The mistake is acting from a state that hasn't changed, expecting a different result. It's trying to produce clarity from confusion, stability from tension, certainty from doubt. And the illusion reflects that mismatch immediately. You might take all the right steps on the surface, but if they're driven by pressure, they carry that signal with them. People feel it, situations respond to it, outcomes organize around it. Not because something is working against you, but because the internal state is still the same. This is where a deeper level of honesty becomes unavoidable. You begin to notice not just what you're doing, but where it's coming from. Is this decision grounded or is it rushed? Is this action clear or is it trying to escape discomfort? Is this choice aligned or is it driven by fear of what might happen if you don't act? These questions are not meant to stop you from moving forward. They're meant to show you whether your movement is reinforcing the old pattern or creating space for something new. Because the illusion is consistent. It doesn't get confused by your intentions, it reads your state, and your state is revealed most clearly in moments of pressure. That's when the old patterns tend to take over. The need to fix, to control, to resolve things immediately. It feels like urgency is necessary, but often it's just familiarity. A learned response that keeps you engaged with the same cycle. If you watch closely, you'll see how quickly your attention jumps outward when something feels off. How fast you try to correct the situation before fully understanding your own reaction to it. That speed is what keeps the pattern in place, because there's no space to see it, and without seeing it, you keep applying the same kind of energy to the same kind of problem, expecting a different outcome. This is why slowing down, even slightly, changes everything. Not because slowing down fixes the situation, but because it reveals what's actually driving your response. It gives you access to the projector instead of just the image. In that space, you may notice that the exhaustion you feel isn't coming from the problem itself, but from the constant effort to manage the illusion directly, to keep adjusting something that was never meant to be controlled that way. And when that becomes clear, the question naturally shifts. If the reflection isn't the place where change happens, then what is? Because once you stop trying to clean the mirror, your attention is no longer scattered. It starts to gather somewhere else, somewhere you may not have fully explored yet, the source. The moment you understand this and release the need to control the mirror, things in your life may begin to fall apart. People drift away, projects change direction. Do not panic. This is not bad luck or another failure. It is the cosmic dust of matter violently reorganizing itself, simply because your old self stopped sustaining that reality. At first, it can feel confusing, even unsettling. You expected things to improve, to become smoother, more aligned. Instead, there's movement, unexpected, sometimes inconvenient movement. Situations that once felt stable begin to shift. Dynamics change. What used to feel certain becomes unclear. But this is the part no one talks about clearly enough. When your internal state changes, the illusion doesn't politely adjust in a straight line. It reorganizes, and reorganization can look like disruption before it looks like progress. Think about it in simple terms. If a structure was built on a certain pattern, your past reactions, your old beliefs, your familiar emotional cycles, then the moment you stop feeding that pattern, the structure loses its support. It cannot remain exactly as it was, so it starts to break down, not as punishment, but as consequence. You may notice that conversations don't flow the same way anymore. People who used to resonate with your old patterns feel distant, or the connection shifts in a way you can't fully explain. Opportunities you thought were certain begin to change shape or disappear altogether, and the instinct almost immediately is to interpret this as something going wrong. That's where awareness matters most. Because if you misread this phase, you will try to rebuild the very structure that is dissolving. You'll reach for what feels familiar, even if it was limiting. You'll try to restore old dynamics, re-establish old patterns, just to regain a sense of stability. And in doing so, you reconnect with the same signal that created those conditions in the first place. This is how people unknowingly reverse their own progress. Not because they lack discipline, but because they mistake transformation for loss. The illusion in this phase can look chaotic, not because it is unstable, but because it is in transition. It's rearranging itself around a new internal reference point that is not yet fully stabilized. So there's a gap, a space where the old is no longer fully present, but the new hasn't fully formed either. And that space can feel uncomfortable, because your mind wants certainty. It wants something to hold on to, something to define as this is working or this is failing. But this phase doesn't offer that clarity right away. Instead, it asks for something different, the ability to remain steady without immediate confirmation. You might wake up one day and feel less reactive, more grounded, but your external world hasn't caught up yet. Or things might look messier than before, even though internally you feel different. That contrast can create doubt if you're not aware of what's happening, because the illusion is still carrying momentum from your past state while beginning to reorganize around your present one. And during that overlap, things can appear inconsistent. This is where many people fall back into old habits. They see the disruption and assume they need to act quickly, fix something, regain control. But that impulse is exactly what reconnects them to the previous pattern. Instead, there's a different approach. You observe the changes without rushing to label them. You allow space for things to move without immediately trying to stabilize them. Not passively, not carelessly, but with a kind of grounded attention that doesn't panic at movement. Because movement is a sign that something is shifting. Even if it doesn't look like improvement yet, there's also something deeper happening here. As the old structure collapses, parts of your identity that were tied to it begin to loosen. The way you used to see yourself in certain roles, certain situations, certain patterns, it starts to feel less solid, and that can feel like losing something. But what you're actually losing is the version of yourself that was maintaining that specific reflection in the illusion. Without that version, constantly reinforcing the same signals, the external world has no choice but to reorganize. It's not immediate, and it's not always smooth, but it is precise. The key is not to interfere with that precision out of fear, because if you stay present through this phase, without rushing to rebuild what is falling away, you begin to notice something new emerging. Not fully formed yet, but different, less reactive, less forced. And in that emerging space, your relationship with the illusion starts to change even more. You're no longer just stepping back from the reflection. You're beginning to realize where the reflection is coming from in the first place. You stop being the image suffering consequences on the movie screen and permanently step into the projection booth. By maintaining the silent certainty that your desire is already a fact, while ignoring the temporary provocations of matter, the external world loses its rigidity. By the laws of physics, it has no choice but to bend and reflect your new command. This shift is not dramatic on the outside. No one around you necessarily sees it happening. But internally, it changes everything. You're no longer waiting for the illusion to tell you who you are or what is possible. You're no longer checking the screen for permission to feel stable, confident, or at ease. You begin from a different place. There is a quiet decision that forms, not forced, not loud, but steady. A recognition that what you choose to hold internally does not need immediate validation from the external world to be real, and that recognition creates a kind of independence from appearances. Before, every fluctuation in the illusion pulled you with it. If something looked wrong, you felt wrong. If something improved, you felt relief. Your state was constantly being shaped by what you saw, but now that dependency starts to weaken. You notice the same external triggers, but they don't land the same way. A number on a screen, a delayed response, an unexpected change. These things still appear, but they no longer define your internal state so easily. There is space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, something stable begins to form. That stability is what most people try to create through control, but it doesn't come from controlling the illusion. It comes from no longer being controlled by it. This is what it means to step into the projection booth. You are not ignoring reality. You are seeing it for what it is, a delayed, moving reflection that does not require immediate reaction. And because you are no longer reacting automatically, your energy is no longer scattered across every external change. It becomes focused. And with that focus, your internal signals become more coherent, less mixed, less contradictory. You're no longer sending out urgency and expectation at the same time, or confidence on the surface while holding doubt underneath. There is less noise. That doesn't mean you feel perfect all the time. It means that when something does arise, doubt, tension, uncertainty, you see it earlier. You don't immediately identify with it. You don't build a story around it. You notice it, and in that noticing, it loses some of its influence. This is where the illusion begins to respond differently. Not because you are forcing it, but because the signal behind your perception is changing. The consistency of your internal state starts to outweigh the temporary fluctuations of your environment, and over time, the external world reorganizes around that consistency. It might begin in small ways. A situation that would normally trigger stress feels lighter. A decision becomes clearer without overthinking. You act without that familiar pressure in your chest. These are subtle shifts, but they indicate something deeper. You're no longer being driven by the old patterns. And as that becomes more stable, your relationship with time changes as well. You are less concerned with when things will happen, because you are no longer measuring your state against immediate results. You understand that the illusion has its own pace, its own way of reorganizing, and you don't need to interfere with that process. This removes a layer of tension that most people carry without realizing. The constant checking, the quiet urgency, the need for confirmation, it starts to fade. Not because you forced it away, but because it no longer serves a purpose. You are no longer looking outward to decide what to feel inward, and that creates a different kind of certainty. Not the kind that demands proof, but the kind that remains even when proof hasn't appeared yet. It's steady, almost silent. And because it doesn't depend on conditions, it doesn't collapse when conditions fluctuate. This is where many people begin to notice something surprising. The illusion, which once felt rigid and unresponsive, starts to soften. Situations that seemed fixed begin to open. Paths appear where there were none before, not in a dramatic or magical way, but in a natural, almost logical unfolding, because the resistance that was holding everything in place is no longer being maintained. You're not pushing against the reflection anymore, and you're not being pulled by it either. You are holding your position at the source, and from there, your influence is indirect, but far more powerful. Still, there is one final layer to see clearly, because even from the projection booth, there can be a subtle sense of separation, as if you are here observing and directing, and the world is out there responding. And as long as that separation remains, there is still a trace of effort, a sense that something needs to align, to connect, to come together. But what happens when even that distance begins to dissolve? At this level of clarity, the desperate feeling that something might go wrong simply evaporates. You understand at a cellular level that matter and your consciousness are the exact same substance. Life abandons struggle and becomes a gentle stage of creation where things begin flowing toward you because you no longer offer any magnetic resistance. This isn't an idea you repeat. It's something you start to notice directly in how you experience moments. The separation that once felt so real, the sense that you were here and the world was out there, begins to soften, not in a dramatic or mystical way, but in a quiet, almost obvious recognition. The illusion no longer feels like something you have to manage. It feels like something you are participating in, from the inside. Before you were watching outcomes and reacting to them. Then you learn to step back and observe, to hold your state regardless of what appeared. But here, even that distance starts to dissolve. There is less effort in holding anything, less sense that you need to maintain a position, because there is no longer a battle between you and what you see. You might notice it in small ordinary situations. A conversation that would once create tension now unfolds naturally. You respond without rehearsing your words. You listen without anticipating what could go wrong. There's a fluidity that wasn't there before. Not because you're trying to be calm, but because nothing inside you is pushing against the moment. And that changes how the illusion organizes itself around you. When there is no internal resistance, there is nothing for external resistance to lock onto. Situations don't need to escalate to get your attention. Delays don't trigger the same urgency. Even uncertainty feels different, not as a threat, but as open space. This is where life begins to feel lighter, but not in a superficial way. It's not about everything being easy or perfect. It's about the absence of that constant inner friction that used to shape every experience. The need to control fades because it no longer feels necessary. You act when action is clear. You pause when it isn't. And in both cases, there is no pressure to force a result. That alone changes the quality of what unfolds, because your actions are no longer coming from fear or lack. They come from alignment. And alignment in this sense is not something you create. It's what remains when the noise drops away. When the patterns of reaction, urgency, and control lose their hold, what's left is a more direct connection between your awareness and what is happening. That connection is subtle, but precise. You begin to sense things earlier. Not in a predictive way, but in a responsive way. You feel when something is off before it becomes a problem. You notice when a choice feels clear without needing to analyze it. There is less second-guessing because there is less internal conflict. And this clarity reflects back through the illusion, not as instant perfection, but as coherence. Things start to fit together more naturally. Opportunities align without excessive effort. Interactions carry less tension. The external world begins to mirror the simplicity of your internal state. What once felt like a complex system to manage now feels more like a flow to move with. And in that flow, time itself seems to shift, not literally, but in how you experience it. There is less waiting, less rushing, less sense of being behind or ahead. Moments feel more complete as they are, instead of being measured against what should happen next. This removes another layer of resistance, because so much of the old pattern was tied to time, trying to speed things up, fearing delays, interpreting waiting as failure. Without that pressure, the illusion no longer needs to reflect urgency back to you. It begins to reflect stability instead. And from that stability, something deeper becomes clear. You were never separate from what you were trying to change. The same awareness that observes is the one shaping the experience, not in a controlling way, but in a participatory way. The boundary between observer and matter was never fixed. It only seemed that way when your attention was fragmented. Now, as that fragmentation settles, there is a sense of continuity, a direct link between your state and what unfolds, without the need to constantly monitor or adjust. Life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like something that responds. And as natural as this begins to feel, there is still one final shift waiting to be seen clearly. Not about doing more or understanding more, but about recognizing what has been true underneath all of this from the very beginning. You spent years fighting against dense ghosts projected onto a wall, but today that blindfold has fallen. Until you understand these truths about the illusion, nothing changes within you. But now that you have regained awareness of who you truly are, the illusion has lost its power. The mirror of the universe is clean and standing by, waiting for your command. What new reality will you choose to project, starting from this exact second? This is no longer theory. It's something you can observe in how you breathe, how you react, how you move through simple moments. The shift is quiet but real. If you made it this far, write this in the comments. I no longer fight the illusion, I direct it. That's how I know you stayed until the end. And if this resonated with you, watch one of the videos on your screen now. If you want to go deeper and support the channel, consider becoming a member. Exclusive content is coming soon.